Hi, I'm Jared Hillam. In modern data management, it's almost a given now that ETL is happening in the database. The correct name for this is ELT because the extraction and the loading happens before the transformation. But if you need a refresher about this, I recommend viewing one of our videos titled ETL versus ELT. I specifically want to zero in on the modern methods organizations are using to address data transformation at the database level. In traditional ETL tools, there's usually a graphical user interface that expresses the transformations of data in the form of widgets that the developer can drag and drop and connect to each other. So everything is very visual and in a way self-documenting. But with data processing happening in the cloud database anyway, everything ultimately becomes a SQL query, which then begs the question, do you need the widgets? Now, I'm not going to solve that question in this video, but I do want to speak to the advantages and disadvantages of building your ELT directly in code. And let's start with the disadvantages. As I mentioned before, having widgets for each transformation step provides visual documentation of the transformation flow. And some would argue that this is easier for developers to use because the transformation elements are more accessible technically. These visuals are simply not available in code. So the audience of people that could interpret code versus a flow of graphical widgets is smaller. So for example, if you're onboarding a new employee, the transition of that employee will typically be faster if they're not having to adapt to coded ELT. Another disadvantage of coded ELT is that code can be written a million different ways to get the same result. And this can create challenges when inconsistent code is used for the same purposes and developers are managing that code base for the long term. This variation also means that you could have a lot of poorly tuned code mixed in and you may not even know it. So let's speak to some of the advantages. The obvious advantage is cost. If you're coding all your ELT, then you're the creator and owner of that code and nobody can send you a bill to use it. Creating your own code also allows for endless amounts of tuning. There are code segments that I've seen that are so well tuned that no generic tool in the world could match its performance. And performance in the cloud is directly connected to cost of compute, especially over the long run. Code also allows for more exotic data transformations to be performed. Even the most mature ETL tools or ELT tools provide some kind of coding widget because they can't possibly package every scenario into their products. Now, there is a slight twist that I want to add to this picture. For many years now, there have been tools on the market that allow for organizations to structure their code into a referenceable folder model. This model allows for reusable coding elements to be leveraged across the organization's data efforts. So imagine you have a standard way of coding, say, the roll-up of a market segment. This standard method may get called 50 times in your entire code base, but rather than copying and pasting the same logic 50 times, you could reference the code in the model, and if you need to change that code, you could edit it there only once. This ability removes much of the sting from the downsides of coding. Resources still have to understand how to code, but the chain of logic is more containable. The one thing that for sure doesn't go away is the cost of a tool, in this case, the referenceable folder model. So how do you choose the right approach for your organization? Well, if you're incorporating a large body of ETL developers, you may need the widgets. However, if your team is very comfortable with code, you can save on the costs of logic management. And if you want a mix of both the flexibility of code and the management of logic, this can be done with the referenceable folder model. If you'd like to learn more about these methods, I've included a white paper in the video description. Additionally, if you're working on deploying for your organization, I recommend you reach out to Intricity to talk with a specialist.